Hi, I am Tony Russo, and this is Funeral Service Insider, the podcast from Kates-Boylston. Conversations worth having about the culture and business surrounding death care and end-of-life care. This week, we are speaking with Paddy Lynch. He is a third-generation funeral director and works with his family in the greater Detroit area, the South Michigan area. And he also has kind of developed a reputation for buying up buildings that were on their way out and fixing them up. But these are some of the city's most iconic buildings, and they all also have some relation to death care, or I guess it's more fair to say that they have been reimagined or reimagined with death care or end-of-life care and grief relief, grief counseling in mind. So it's a great show. He's a really engaging guy. He does most of the talking, which is good because I've already done enough. So we are going to hear from Paddy in a couple seconds after these words from our friends at Homesteaders.
In a business built on trust, consistent financial strength speaks volumes. That's why I'm proud to share that AM Best has once again affirmed Homesteaders' financial strength with an A- excellent rating. Last year was a transformative one for our company, and AM Best affirmation tells us we're on the right track. As a mutual company owned by our policy owners, we remain laser focused on delivering dependable value, industry-leading support, and future-ready solutions to funeral professionals nationwide. Homesteaders is stronger than ever by every measure. Our partners rely on us for the long term, and it is critical that we execute at a high level today while aggressively planning for the future. Reach out to your Homesteaders account executive to hear more about how we are leading the profession in investing in tools and services that benefit funeral providers.
So growing up as not only a third generation funeral director, but a third generation in an already pretty large operation, you aren't definitely bound to be a funeral director, right?
Yeah, I think when I joined my dad about 20 years ago, of the 8 funeral homes that we now operate, we had at least 5 or 6 of them. So it's not like we hadn't been around. We'd been around since the 40s. And of my dad's 8 siblings, 6 of them were working with him in funeral service. So out of the 9 kids, 7 out of the 9 went into funeral service. And my generation, there's, roughly 10 of us. So, and I had a number of cousins who had already entered funeral service ahead of me. So I was honored to be able to join and learn from people that I had known my entire life. And my dad and I still work together. He's going to be 75 next week, and he likes to say he's not retired but not required, but he still works quite a bit, and we really enjoy working together. And my cousin, my aunt are with us, my uncle. So
I just wanted to clarify, you have a bunch of family, but not all of your family in the business, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. I have, on the Lynch side, I probably have 25, 30 first cousins, and about 10 of them work in funeral service. So as a family now, we operate 8 funeral homes in southeastern Michigan, and there's a couple of us at each location. We operate autonomously for one another, which is to say, I don't give my cousin a hard time about his payroll or how much vacation he wants to take, but we support each other in that we'll share staff and vehicles when we need to. We share the same website. We sort of maintain the same policies, and we operate very, very similarly, and yet we're spread out across 4 or 5 counties. So it's a really nice balance, I believe.
It also helps that you have the same attitude kind of culturally because, you all came from the same place and you all have kind of the same vision, right?
Yeah. So it was my grandfather that started us in funeral service. He had 9 children. The first to join him was my father, and then 6 more children after that, a son-in-law, and one of my cousins is married to a funeral director. So there's a lot of people involved, and we're grateful that we're still independently owned and operated, and our name's on the sign, and we can treat people the way we want to treat them without having to answer to shareholders or what have you. So it's all good.
Great. So, and you went to Boston College not for mortuary school, but to take your regular old degree and to play football.
Right. I went there. I studied English and theology, was super grateful for the education I received from the Jesuits at BC, played college football for 4 years, had a wonderful time, would help my dad here and there when I was home on break, certainly helped him when I was in high school. But it wasn't like, I was never like the 16 or 17-year-old kid that was like, I'll be at mortuary school in 5 years. I really kind of focused on my undergrad. And it was at the end of my undergrad when I was finally in a position to actually consider, applying for mortuary school that I sat down with my dad. And it's actually kind of an interesting little story. I won't.
No, please tell it.
I was eligible for a 5th year at BC because I had been redshirted, and BC makes all their athletes graduate in 4 years. They're a little unique. You don't spread your undergrad out over 5 years if you're redshirted. So it's this interesting dynamic where at the end of your 4 years, you got your bachelor's degree. If they want you to play a 5th year, they can invite you back. You can pursue a master's, which I had begun. They can also tell you, hey, you've done a nice job for us, but we don't need you to come back. I had started at fullback my senior season. And so I was, the plan was for me to come back and play a 5th year, finish my master's. But I'll be honest, I had no pro aspirations. I wasn't that kind of a player. I was an okay college football player and had no pro aspirations at all. I had suffered a couple injuries, nothing catastrophic, but I was just I was burned out, and I was sort of burned out from academic life too. It's a rigorous academic environment. And I knew my dad was going to be really disappointed that I might not take up the 5th year of eligibility. He'd made a habit of driving to Boston for games to see me play and then driving right back to the funeral home. So, but at the same time, as I was thinking, you know what, I really don't want to play another year, that's when I really started to consider my next step, which would be mortuary school. So I actually sat him down. I'll never forget it. It was in the office that I'm sitting in right now at the funeral home. And I sat across from his desk and I said, I got good news and I got bad news. And he goes, well, what's the bad news? And I said, I really don't think I want to play another year of football, which I knew would disappoint him. And he goes, okay. And he goes, well, what's the good news? And I said, I think I'd like to go to mortuary school. So that's sort of how it played out. I was probably just about 21, 22 years old at the time. Then I went to mortuary school the following year. So we've been working together now for about 20 years.
And where did you end up going to mortuary school?
At Wayne State, which is the only mortuary school in Michigan. And that's where pretty much all of us Lynch family members went.
Well, I'm kind of from a small family by your standards. I'm the oldest of 6 boys. And whenever we would go to school, we all went to the same school. And it was like you get one and then you get the other and then you get the other. Was it like that in mortuary school for you guys?
Yeah. I don't even know what number I was having graduated from there. I was lucky in that because I already had my bachelor's, I, of course, had to do a prereq. But mortuary school was only 1 year for me. I was able to get it done pretty quickly and start working. So it all worked out.
Right. And by then you were pretty much comfortable with all. You did this in high school and in summers. Did you do like removals and work in the funeral home?
Yeah. Swinging the door, probably starting in middle school. And then I remember being brought on funerals during summer break with my dad in high school and learning how to make a removal and things like that. But I didn't really get into it until after my undergrad in a real way.
And so you were working as a funeral director, but then you got into, I don't want to say the real estate business because that's not quite right, but you, I guess, started buying up these cool old buildings. And at first it wasn't about, like, when I came to the story, I'm like, well, this is definitely, connection to kind of aftercare and advanced care. And that wasn't the way you saw it at the time at all, right?
Yeah. And if you don't mind, it actually starts, it's worth noting, it probably actually starts in 2011 because what happened was I was living in a little suburban house near the funeral home. And we're going back to 2008, 2009. And I started, as many people in my position would have at that time, I started going into the city more and more. I'm in my mid 20s, whether it was for a Tigers game or a concert or to check out a new restaurant or whatever it is. I lived, 15 minutes, 20 minutes from Detroit. So I was going a lot. And as you probably and most people can remember, things really started to bottom out after '08 from a real estate standpoint, and especially in Detroit. I mean, Detroit famously declared bankruptcy, et cetera, et cetera. So there are these incredible historic mansions in Detroit. You can imagine with the automotive boom and all the other industrial things of the 20th century, the extraordinary homes were built. And I got the idea that I might want, I was young and dumb. I was in my mid 20s, that I might want to try to buy one of these. And I blame my parents because they raised me in kind of an old home where they were always doing projects. Mm-hmm. And I found the old Stanley Kresge mansion, Kresge being the precursor to Kmart. And it was like, it is like over 10,000 square feet. And I bought it for $125,000. And that was in 2011. And I moved in and moved some of my friends in to start restoring this total money pit. It was like the movie. and that was even though that was my home and it wasn't like a commercial business, it was a fairly iconic home building. And that was my first real deep dive into historical preservation or historical restoration work. From there, the Spitz, the old Russian Jewish infamous bathhouse of Detroit, I discovered because it's not far from that home. It was basically in my neighborhood, and a buddy of mine whose dad used to hang out there back in the day introduced me to it. And it was this, well, interestingly enough, the same age, roughly the same size, and basically the same condition that my home was when I bought it. So I see them as almost like sister projects. Yeah. So in 2017, it's a totally ridiculous and long story, but I managed to buy this old, notorious bathhouse, which had experienced everything from gangsters during Prohibition to swingers and seedy parties in the 80s and 90s and everything in between. And I came to know it for its very traditional nights where the old businessmen and rabbis would get together and scheme and eat steak and, sit around and drink and smoke. That's how I came to know it. And I thought, well, I kind of know how this goes. And there seems to be enough support from the people that were in my life to go ahead and try to buy this and restore it. And so that's when I actually tackled something that was like another commercial business.
And this was like genuinely just about the preservation. It wasn't like you were thinking about like changing careers or anything like that.
No, exactly. And, looking back, it's like there was no plan. I mean, now we see in the last, certainly in the last 5 years or so, there's this incredible boom on wellness, especially like climate therapies and saunas and cold plunging. I mean, you see this everywhere. Well, even back then, it wasn't quite as popular, and then it's become very popular. So the timing was interesting. But I was just trying to save this old, dilapidated place that I love visiting once a week, because everybody knew at the funeral home that Wednesday nights were my night at the Spitz. And that was the one night a week where Paddy probably wouldn't have his cell phone on him. If you absolutely needed to reach him, you could call the landline at the Spitz and somebody would have to go down and get me out of the steam room or the pool. But it was sort of my 4 or 5 hour mini oasis retreat respite. And I remember, I'm preaching to the choir, but like everybody knows the stresses and sadnesses that funeral service can bring. The Spitz just was this way to like really unwind and just kind of physically sweat it out. And my mind and my body just really appreciated it. And so that was my routine once a week for years. And then I had the opportunity to buy it and start restoring it because it was in disrepair. So
So when you would eventually open the convent, which we'll get to in a second, but when you opened the convent, and that was my introduction, I guess, to kind of you and what you were doing. When I saw that you had purchased this other building, I thought that it was like part of a thing, though you didn't see it that way at the time. By the time you were ready to buy the convent, you'd made that connection.
No.
Go ahead.
I've told this story before. It's a meaningful one for me. I was sitting there with my buddy, Brad, who's worked with me on and off at the Schmidt for years now. We got to know each other because he was dating a young woman that I knew, and he came to love the Schmidt, and then he was managing it for a while in the early days. Anyway, we're sitting there in the dining room, maybe 6 months after taking control of it. And it had started to become more and more popular, just sort of the new, energy coming in. We started seeing like more and more combat vets. We saw Brad was part of like the recovery community, drugs and alcohol recovery. And so we started to see, people from his AA groups. We started to see all different walks of life. And I remember sitting there with him, and it was a men's night, and I'm looking out at the crowd, and I say this I always preface this. I'm saying it with love. I go, oh man, what a group of freaks, and I use that word lovingly. And he goes, yeah, man, they all come here to heal. And that really had a profound impact on me, because that's when I realized that it was in so many ways like the funeral home. It's a big old house where people come to try to let go, to try to find comfort in one another, to emote in some capacity. And I just started to see it through the lens that I already knew. And that's when it actually started to really click for me. And it became easier and easier as time went on, because I just started thinking, well, we do a really good job in funeral service. What can I bring over? So like now there's always a couple people to greet you at the Schmidt's door, somebody to check you in, somebody to show you around if you've never been there, not unlike a visitation at the funeral home. Mm-hmm. There's always somebody there to offer you a drink, or, where are you coming from, or what do you need? And so this kind of hospitality that understands that we all need community and catharsis and a sense of, healing. It really, the connections were actually quite provocative in many ways. And so, ever since then, I've sort of seen them through from the same angle. Yeah.
And this is where the convent comes in, which is like explicitly a healing place.
I think so. What happened, long story short, is I found this old convent. And at this point, I fully have accepted the fact that I have a fetish for money pits. And so I'm always, and I got married too. And so my wife would like roll her eyes at like, the things that I would consider looking at, or I'd go, look at a building behind her back or something. And so I found this old convent not far from the Schmitz that I had always kind of admired. I just thought it was a cool old building. It reminded me of my dorms at Boston College. And we go and see it. And this is sort of during or coming out of COVID. And I'm just thinking, okay, like, well, how could we just figure out a way to cash flow this building? So I'm just thinking, well, make it like it's always been. Just basically make it a dorm. Find like young people who are willing to pay cheap rent to kind of live in a weird communal space. And she's like, that is the worst idea you've ever come up with. She's like, they're going to be partying. They're going to be sleeping with each other. They're like, who wants to own a dorm? And I was like, okay, you're right. She's usually right. But to her credit, because she's smarter than me, she was like, Paddy, first and foremost, we know a ton of artists, which is true. We're connected to the art community in Detroit, and they're always looking for cheap studio space. And she said, beyond that, we have all of these wellness practitioners in our life, because one of the ways that I built the business at the Schmidt is I let like estheticians and massage therapists and acupuncturists come in and basically provide their services to people. I wouldn't charge them at all, and they would just collect, separately. Like they just had their own little autonomous business inside the Schmidt.
Right.
And it was a great way to build, community and get more people into the Schmidt. But a lot of these people during COVID, they weren't able to provide their services. The Schmidt got shut down for a while. They might be like trying to do it out of their own home, which they didn't like, or trying to do it like mobily. So anyway, we're like, here's an opportunity, because the little like nun cells in the convent, there's about 20 of them, like these little rooms. They're just big enough for like a massage therapist or an esthetician or just like a one-man show. And so my wife was like, hey, let's give all these people that are already in our orbit like their own little space. And so it's essentially like a wellness business incubator. And we're almost always at capacity. Like I think right now out of 20 studios, 18 are occupied. And so, yeah, and we thought it would be kind of interesting to combine art and wellness. So like the former chapel inside the convent can be everything from a yoga studio, which then, to like a little gallery. And it's just been a cool way to keep an old building, active. So yeah, that was I think 2022.
Yeah, I think that was the story that I mentioned earlier, where that it kind of turned me on to what you were doing down there. And do you think that as I mentioned earlier, is where you saw the connection where this could go forward as wellness?
Yeah, I mean, that was a way, like the Schwitz had always existed. And again, like the Schwitz had done everything from a place of healing to a place of like debauchery.
Right.
As much as I was able to bring my own life and personality to the Schwitz, like the Schwitz is what it is. And I've never tried to overly project myself onto it. I kind of let it be what it is. The convent was really an opportunity for us to take a building that had been not really used in any real way for a long time and do something more, specific. And it was also a great way to just support people who might just be getting started in business or might just be starting to pursue their art career. We have some people who are there that might already have a professional career, but they're just like a hobbyist. Like they just like to paint in their spare time, and this is a nice little spot for them to do so. It was also a wonderful way to support the parish. The convent is still part of a larger campus, Transfiguration Church, which is on the National Register of Historic Places. There's still Mass every Sunday. Father Andy lives in the rectory across the street. Like they were thrilled that the old convent would finally be put to good use. And so both of our daughters were baptized there. So we do feel like we're also part of a larger community there. And that's really nice because a lot of these religious buildings in Detroit went into such disrepair that they got torn down or they're just completely blighted. We're glad that didn't happen with the convent. It was shortly thereafter, and I would say that the convent was a big inspiration, that my aunt Bridget and I went to one of the old Romanian Byzantine parishes that we served that needed a little extra activity and income. And we actually put complimentary grief sessions at the church using some of the facilitators and practitioners from the convent to offer that, so that there was a place specifically once a week that people who were grieving could go to receive care that's free and open to the public. So Lynch and Sons Healing Center, as it's called, really came out of the work of the convent. I mean, I think we opened the convent and it was only a couple months later that we had sessions going at the healing center. So those kind of went hand in hand.
It's award season here at Kates-Boylston, and American Funeral Director magazine is accepting applications for its Funeral Director of the Year award. You can nominate a colleague or you can nominate yourself, someone who you think deserves the recognition for the work that they do. And of course, American Cemetery and Cremation magazine is also accepting nominations for its ACE Award. The American Cemetery Excellence Award is open to all cemeteries. You can nominate yourself or you can nominate another cemetery that you think is doing a great job. Applications for both awards are due on August 8th, so make sure you start getting your applications in. This is a great way to celebrate your company or yourself or your colleagues. Click the link below for more information. And before we go on, you mentioned your Aunt Bridget. Did she work with you at the funeral home? And of course, you are working at the funeral home like this whole time. This is your still job.
She worked in full time in funeral service for a long time, and then she went back years ago and got her master's degree in counseling. And so she's been our main resource. She'll follow up with families that we've served, or if we know people have really experienced, a significant loss. She's like our go-to. So she works alongside the funeral homes or complements the funeral homes, but she's got her own thing.
Yeah, and I wanted to say that, for a third generation business, you've got all of these families that you've been helping for all these years. You've got this kind of reputation around town. As you started to bring in all of this new stuff, which was before it came into fashion, really, or it has come into fashion, I'm wondering, how did your dad feel about, the new aginess?
No, that's a good question. No, my dad, honestly, it's no secret that, funeral homes, as time goes on, have had to, perhaps feel the need to pursue, pre-need sales more and more and secure market share or sell more product because cremation rates are on the rise. So you can't always sell a casket. So you better sell an urn and some keepsake jewelry and just all this stuff that, while it's not terrible in and of itself, it's never really been what we're about. Anybody who knows us locally will tell you that we're not very aggressive when it comes to sales. Certainly when it comes to pre-need, we don't really check the boxes that a lot of the funeral homes do these days. And by providing aftercare that is both traditional, like Bridget has a monthly traditional roundtable, support group session, but we also have breath work, sound healing, art therapy. Being able to offer these things so that people can get the support they need without being told they need to prepay for their funeral or deal with a sales op. My dad is smart enough and caring enough to know that this is another opportunity to set us apart from the way most funeral homes are these days. And so I think it works perfectly fine with how we've always conducted ourselves. And my feeling, and it's no secret, this is the way we've always we're in for the long haul. We've been doing this for 3 generations. God willing, we'll be doing it for more. People will remember that whether they attended or met somebody who attended one of the Healing Center sessions, they'll likely remember that, the Lynches went out of their way to make sure there was a weekly opportunity for people to get support, where they may not have wanted to sit down one-on-one with a therapist. They just wanted to be in a room and be able to silently participate in art therapy. I don't know. It was important to me to give people these options, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I wrote down the words aggressive community involvement. How's that?
Exactly. True. Exactly. And for the same reason that my grandpa was in Rotary and all the things that we've all done, it's just you want people to know that you're there and that you're not a commission-based salesperson. You're the funeral director that people call when help is needed. And that's just always been one of our family philosophies. We're not going to call you to sell you something. You can call us when you need help. And that's just the position and posture that we've decided to maintain.
That is absolutely fantastic. I guess, from here, I guess all we can do is press on to, I guess, the biggest deal that has been made. I get Google alerts, and when you bought that Dutch Girl donut shop, every day there was another story. And then every time you open the door or every little improvement, people wrote stories about it. So it was highly anticipated. So can you tell me kind of like how that all came about?
So what funeral director doesn't love donuts? Basically, for those, who may not know, Dutch Girl Donuts is this iconic donut shop in Detroit that's been in the same place since 1947. Interestingly enough, we got our start in funeral service in 1948, just down the road on Woodward Avenue. But when my mom was going to school in Detroit in the early 70s, she and my dad started to date. And my dad was always, going to see her, and she lived right by the donut shop. So my dad confesses that he hit the donut shop more than he'd like to admit. And he, like so many Detroiters, just loved this place. Well, I then moved to Detroit in 2011 in the old house that I mentioned, which is right off Woodward, not far from the donut shop. So passing Dutch Girl became a daily routine for me. It was on my commute to the funeral home. And I would stop in, plenty of days, get a dozen for me and the, funeral home staff. And it became part of my routine. Well, eventually, Dutch Girl sadly closed between the death of the parents, the original owner's son and daughter-in-law, because they had entered their third generation. The parents died. This was basically during COVID. Staffing was super difficult, and the shop closed. And Detroiters really grieved. Talk about grief. They really grieved the closing of Dutch Girl, and I was right there with them. What I didn't know until that time was that my cousin, Tim Lynch Jr., who runs our funeral home in Walled Lake, Michigan, about half hour from the location I operate in Clawson, he had grown up with the Dutch Girl family. They all lived out there. I didn't know that. He handled funeral services for them. So he not only handled the funeral service of Dutch Girl herself, the original founder, but her children. And he had developed this really nice relationship with the family based on my work in Detroit and my love for Dutch Girl. He's the one that first brought it up to me, and I guess separately to them, that we should have a conversation about the possibility of me taking over and reopening Dutch Girl Donuts. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, there's no way my wife is going to let me get away with this. Like I was telling you in the pre-interview, she already rolls her eyes, and you remember her comments about the convent. So she's like, I always have to be careful what ideas I bring to the table, because I don't want to get,
right,
yelled at or whatever. So, but interestingly enough, she grew up in Detroit, knew about Dutch Girl, of course. And I said, what do you think? And she goes, you know what? This isn't a terrible idea. You at least have permission to pursue and see what comes of it. So I was pleasantly surprised. And then, I spoke with the family. Actually, what I did, and it turns out that I guess they received 30 other offers of various, people with different ideas, just trying to buy the name, not the building, maybe moving it, the brand right away to a different location, or buying the building but changing it. I don't know. I didn't get into the details with that about them, but I do know they received a bunch of offers. I basically wrote a letter that said, listen, it's a huge part of my life. I've loved it my whole life. I don't want it to change. I just want to get it back open, and I want to honor your, family's legacy there. I don't actually like change that much. If anything, I'm kind of a preservationist. So anyway, they accepted, and the rest is history. We were able to reopen that just over a year ago, really. It was May of 2004 that we finally got it back open. And the response has been extraordinary. I mean, it's open 24 hours a day, and people love Dutch Girl Donuts. And I bring them now to most of the funerals that I direct. I'll bring them to the church and give them to the clergy and the staff, or give them to the family. And people, I always joke, you could give somebody $20 or a dozen Dutch Girl Donuts, and they'll take the donuts every time. Yeah, it's amazing. And So it's another just great Detroit, icon.
And how much did you get into it? Like, how much do you know or did you know about the donut business?
It's funny. I don't know how to make a donut. I didn't know anything, but thank God there was institutional knowledge. There were at least two or three of the original donut makers that have been there for years willing to come back. My wife, to her credit, when it comes to organization, efficiency, lack of waste, those are not my fortes. Okay. So she has done a brilliant job on top of her full-time work and motherhood, um, keeping Dutch Girl really organized and efficient, because that's really what it's about. I mean, the funeral home and the Schwitz, as I said, they're kind of like two sides of the same coin, really making people feel comfortable. You have people that might be there for hours at a time. Dutch Girl's really about quality control, making sure they taste great, making sure people can get it in and out fast. So it really is a different business model in many ways, and she's handled it brilliantly. So between the institutional knowledge, her dedication, and then a wonderful support staff, we've just been able to, make the donuts every day, and that's the story. Yeah.
And I guess the final straw is the most recent one, but it also connects to you and your family and your funeral business. It was the recent, very recent, I guess, purchase of the Dakota Ratskeller.
Rathskeller is basically a generic German word for like cellar bar. So like if you're a civil servant in Munich and you are going to get together with your friend after work for a drink, you typically don't have to go to the bar. You literally just go to the basement of the city building because the Rathskeller's got drinks on tap. So the Dakota Inn is another institution here in Detroit. It's actually not far from Dutch Girl at all. It's been there since 1933. Karl Kurtz was a German immigrant that came from Germany with $50 and started working for Henry Ford, earning $5 a day. And unlike the Schwitz that came to be during the height of Prohibition under the Purple Gang, which was the Russian Jewish mafia of Detroit, responsible for like 80% of the booze coming into the country during Prohibition. Unlike the Schwitz, Mr. Kurtz waited until Prohibition was over and got one of the first legal liquor licenses in the city of Detroit and opened up his little German bar that over the course of years got bigger and bigger and became just a super special spot for so many people, generations of people. There's sing-alongs every night. When you step in, you think you're in Bavaria. Countless people have had their first date there or, had their family reunions there. The holidays are very special there with Christmas carols and so forth. I, like any Detroiter, had gone in there over the years and enjoyed it. I did not know the Kurtz family personally. However, there's a church not far from the funeral home that I operate, our Shepherd Lutheran, in Birmingham, Michigan. Our family's been serving that parish for, nearly 100 years. My grandfather was friends with the founding pastor, the whole story. We just very close with that community. Being the good German Lutherans that they all hang out at the Dakota Inn. I'm talking the staff, the clergy, the parishioners. And so it was actually the church secretary and her husband, who's in charge of facilities, who went to the owner, the third generation owner of the Dakota Inn, when they knew he was looking to unwind and wind down and retire, and said, you should really consider talking to Paddy because he's made a habit of this now and we know him personally. And so again, I didn't really go looking for it, to be quite honest. We were finally introduced officially. I think I had met him in passing, but I had never, formally met Karl Kurtz, the third generation proprietor. And we sat down and I could tell that he just really wanted his family's legacy to be maintained. And he didn't have children of his own, so he was looking to pass the torch to someone. And so we bought that officially just a couple months ago and have already started to enjoy operating it this summer. And then everybody's really, what we're gearing up for is Oktoberfest and the holidays there, where it's just crazy busy. So yeah, it's been an interesting ride. All of them are connected to funeral service in some capacity. And thank God I'm still able to come to the funeral home every day. Had a funeral and burial this morning, and I'll be meeting with the family here shortly, and have wonderful teams of people that are willing to oversee and take care of the operations at the various businesses in the city. So I'm lucky. I'm very lucky.
And so one of the words that you keep using when you talk about, talking to these third generation owners about assuming their businesses is you keep using the word legacy. And that's, of course, like your day job is legacy, right?
Yeah, no, it's the connections are strong in that, when you talk about the importance of funerals and what it means to facilitate a good funeral, you're really talking about some key elements. Ritual, I would argue, is critical. Human beings get good at things that they do over and over again throughout the generations, and they don't have to reinvent the wheel, especially when they're grieving and struggling, with the realities we all face. Everyone's looking for community. Everyone typically does better when we're kind of sharing the load. And I think everybody in some capacity is searching for a cathartic experience, catharsis of, I think that we all want, some type of emotional breakthrough or some relief or something. So those are things that I think about a lot. And all of these sort of legacy institutional operations are really about that. Like when people go to the Dakota Inn and have for generations, it is about ritual. It is about community. It is about catharsis. They want to do what their grandfathers and grandmothers were doing 50 years earlier. They want to sing the same songs and drink the same beer and be together. And sadly, as our society values funerals less and less, I think we're missing that opportunity to be together precisely when it's most important to be together. So, we'll say, oh, well, grandma's going to get cremated, and then we might have a service that we can attend via Zoom in 6 months or not. And it's like, okay, well, you've disallowed yourself from an opportunity that human beings took for granted for 2,000 or 3,000 years. So at any rate, I see these connections. And what I have found is that I'm able in a very small way to, through these other ventures and these other communities and meeting people that I would otherwise maybe not meet, I'm able to help them when someone dies. I mean, I've had situations where I've helped people that I know from the Schwitz at the time of death that they wouldn't have known me or otherwise known to call me, but they know me now and they trust me to guide them properly. And so, like so many things in life, the connections continue to evolve and create, more community. So that I'm really grateful for that. I think it's all good stuff.
And that is all I have for you, unless you have something else for me. Is there something I should have asked and didn't, or something you thought you'd get the opportunity to say, but I didn't provide it?
No. I think you did a fantastic job, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk about it. I mean, sometimes I've been interviewed other times by people connected to funeral service, and sometimes I think, well, maybe some people don't see the connections and other people do. So I never know if I'm going to articulate it well enough, but personally, I see them and I feel them, and that's because I kind of have to live it day to day. But it's something that I'm really grateful for.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. That'll do it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
In a business built on trust, consistent financial strength speaks volumes. That's why I'm proud to share that AM Best has once again affirmed Homesteaders' financial strength with an A- excellent rating. Last year was a transformative one for our company, and AM Best affirmation tells us we're on the right track. As a mutual company owned by our policy owners, we remain laser focused on delivering dependable value, industry-leading support, and future-ready solutions to funeral professionals nationwide. Homesteaders is stronger than ever by every measure. Our partners rely on us for the long term, and it is critical that we execute at a high level today while aggressively planning for the future. Reach out to your Homesteaders account executive to hear more about how we are leading the profession in investing in tools and services that benefit funeral providers.
And before we get to the closing credits, I just want to give you a little kind of peek behind the scenes. We had a great chat, and I did a longer feature that's a little bit more in depth in this upcoming Funeral Service Insider newsletter. But there are also links to all of these buildings, and I'll put links to some of the stories covering these buildings. The story about the Kresge Mansion is really worth seeing only because the photos are so awesome, given the condition that building was in. If you have any feedback, and I would love to have it, you can leave it at 732-746-0233, extension 709. That is 732-746-0233, extension 709. You can leave a message, and I will answer you whether or not you want to be named. And if you don't want to be named, just tell me, and I won't name you. And if you don't want your message played back on the show, lots of people just want to tell me what they think. That's a great place to do it. Funeral Service Insider, the podcast, is a Kates-Boylston production. It was written and edited by me, Tony Russo. Please subscribe wherever you're listening now, and we will catch you next time.